Kettlebell Drenga. Rating season is upon us. The battle for the title of North American champion returns to the Twin Cities for the 2024 WKSF North American Championship on September 28th. We have over $2,500 in prizes to be claimed thanks to our incredible sponsors, Living Fit, Pro Kettlebell, CK Maceworks, Morpheus Training, Sorensen Strong, Viking Performance, and Limitless Sports. Register today for your chance for glory and to claim your spoils. Registration is available now for only $100 with raffle prizes for all competitors and the opportunity to win cash prizes for the top performers. We'll be back at the Athlete Lab in Little Canada, Minnesota, and accepting video submissions for online competitors. Go to TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com to register today. Come, answer the call of battle. Join us and fight for your clan, fight for yourself, claim your spoils and your glory. Sign up now and may your name forever ring out in the Hall of Champions. Sign up today at TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com. Welcome to the Platform Podcast, where we talk to coaches, athletes, experts, and real people to learn about their approaches to training, nutrition, mindset, and much more. I am your host, Jordan Kundi-Wright, founder and head coach of the Twin Cities Kettlebell Club. And our mission is to become our best selves through sport. This episode is presented by Morpheus Training. They are back as a sponsor of the 2024 WKSF North American Championship, and I am incredibly excited to partner with them. We are just weeks out from competition day, and they are adding 2 of their M7 heart rate monitors to the prize hoard. Now, what makes Morpheus unique is their dynamic heart rate training adjustments, where you take a recovery test every morning and it adjusts your heart rate zones based on your recovery score, helping you better balance your training intensity and recovery each day and over the long term, which is really the key to consistent improvement because we only get better when we're recovering. Additionally, if your coach is on the Morpheus coaching platform like I am, you can grant them access to your data so that you can see longitudinal trends on your HRV, sleep, walking, training intensity, and more, and see how those drive your performance. Train smarter with Morpheus. And if you want a chance to win a Morpheus M7 heart rate monitor, register for the WKSF North American Championship here on September 28th. It is also an AKLU qualifier event for Team USA, so you can compete to be part of the team that is traveling to Milan, Italy for the 2025 WKSF World Championships. And you will have the chance to claim the title of North American Champion, as well as being registered for all of our prizes. Now, on this episode, I am incredibly excited to welcome in Maude Gorman. She is a passionate kettlebell sport lifter and an endurance athlete, and she shares her unique journey from dropping out of high school to becoming a kettlebell sport competitor, a professional interior designer, and now she loves tackling incredible endurance challenges, including running across Iceland in an event called the Viking Run. In this episode, we discuss the highs and lows of her adventure across Iceland, running 8 marathons in 9 days through freezing conditions, river crossings, harsh weather, and an incredible terrain. She talks about the mental and physical power and discomfort and all of the things that she had to deal with in that journey. She also opens up about her personal history, sharing how surviving trauma and overcoming challenges has shaped her determination to push her limits. Her reflections on resilience, authenticity, and the power of community will leave you motivated to embrace discomfort, descend into discomfort, and chase your own goals. Whether you're an endurance athlete, a kettlebell sport athlete, or simply someone looking for inspiration, I think Maude's story of perseverance and self-belief is one that you won't want to miss. So, without further ado, let's step onto the platform with Maude Gorman. All right, welcome into this week's episode of the Platform Podcast. I am very excited to welcome in my guest, Maude Gorman. She is a kettlebell sport lifter. Modern Living, I believe, is her handle on Instagram, which I love, by the way. And she also just recently decided to do something completely insane, even by kettlebell sport lifting standards. She ran across Iceland with some friends in how many days was it, Maude?
It was 9 days of running, yeah.
9 days they ran across the entirety of Iceland, which is called the Viking Run. So naturally, as someone who very much appreciates Viking culture, and I just had to bring her on to talk about this experience. I gave her some shout out on her posts on Facebook, but I had to ask her to come on, and she graciously accepted. So Maude, thank you so much for coming on the Platform Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, I'm so excited.
Yeah, so well, first let's before we get into the Viking run, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and kind of how you grew up or your origin story a little bit.
Yeah, so I am someone that has not had a very straight path in life. So I've been all over the place as far as, where I ended up and basically what took me to endurance sports to begin with. So I grew up in Hingham, Massachusetts, which is right near Boston, a little bit south of the city. Yep, go.
Shout out to RX Strength,
Yeah.
Jeff Butterworth, who's been on the podcast,
Oh
right?
my God, I love Jeff. He actually came to Iceland, not to run with me, but just to like support and make sure I didn't die. Um, but yeah, I've known Jeff for over 10 years now. I think we were talking about that in Iceland. It's been like almost 12 years, but I'm an interior designer by day and a general contractor. So I work a lot in residential construction. And then by night, I'm lifting kettlebells, I'm doing strength training, and I'm always trying to push myself to become stronger, to become fitter, and to be mentally sharp. So, as I said, not a straight path in life. I actually dropped out of high school when I was 16 and just totally decided that education wasn't for me. But I had a lovely support system and was able to find a path that was a little bit different from my peers, but it ended up working out great.
Excellent. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Hingham, actually, born and raised.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. You're a northeastern girl through and through. I heard
I am.
I
And I love
heard it
cold. I do.
I heard that you at one point were part of the I don't know how to even the beauty queen circuit.
Oh my goodness.
Is
That
that
is
correct?
yes. So I was Miss Massachusetts World in 2015. I'm grateful for all that pageants offered me. It is not something that I would definitely identify with currently, but yeah, there was a time in life where I wore a crown and sash in public, very much so.
Okay. All right. So what is more of a crazy niche culture, pageant culture or kettlebell sport culture?
Oh my God, that's a good one. Honestly, kettlebell sport, to be honest, but in the best way. Like if I had to pick one hands down to be a part of, I would choose kettlebell 10 times over.
Love it. Love it. Well, and you just recently competed internationally in kettlebell sport as well,
I
correct?
did, yeah. I went to IKMF World Championships in Denmark.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that because I heard tell of it a little bit from some of my friends that were over. Greg Anderson is a
Yes.
buddy of mine here. I think he was there with you as
Yeah,
well.
he
Not
lifted
not
out of
with you, but he was there as well.
yep. Yeah, it was honestly, that was the first time I've ever been on a world stage with kettlebell, and it was inspiring and also humbling. So I would say those are my two word choices for that. I trained really hard and I was so excited just to be able to lift and showing up. I lifted the 16-kilogram bell for a 30-minute one arm long cycle. So I did the half marathon, and the absolute sheer strength of my fellow competitors just blew me away. So I competed against a lot of girls that were using the 20-kilogram bell, and that just like inspired me to move up myself when I got back. So I got back from Denmark, and a week later, I did my first online virtual competition with a 20-kilogram bell. It kicked my
Nice.
absolutely.
It will absolutely do that. Go those four
Yeah.
little kilos, right? Just
Oh
just
my God.
just those 4 little kilos, but over
You
30
wouldn't think it
minutes
would.
and
You're like, okay, it's just 4 kilos. No, it absolutely rocked my world. So I've been training with it for a while now, and I'm feeling a little bit more confident with it. But yeah, I would say the experience of being there was very, very inspiring, and really forced me to take a look at my strengths and what I could do better to improve as an athlete.
Nice. So you said it was humbling too. So inspiring, I 100% understand, and humbling, I understand even better. So tell me a little bit more. What you mean? What was humbling about it?
Um, so I wasn't expecting to get my ass kicked so bad, if I'm being honest, which like, you train so hard for something, you hit numbers, you're expecting like a certain result. And so I showed up and I did not compete as I wanted to. So I had a goal to at least get my CMS, which was 314 reps. And I think I got 295. And I had a lot of like miscounted reps that didn't count. So in that regard, like I was very humbled because I thought I was someone that's always practicing my strategy. And like I never thought I would have a rep that didn't count, but it happens to all of us, obviously.
Yeah. Well,
So just
especially in marathon, it's a lot more common in marathon lifting to get no counts. The rules are pretty stringent, and when you're
yeah.
competing internationally, there's that. And then there's, I mean, just by statistical probability, when you're doing 300 plus reps, there's a lot more opportunity for no counted
Yep,
reps than in
absolutely.
a 10-minute set when you're putting up, 100 reps maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, that was definitely part of the humbling experience, but also just not meeting the goal I set for myself. So that was something that I actually kind of dove into afterwards, was wondering like, where is this disconnect coming from? Because I would train in my home gym and I'd hit my numbers and like I'd feel so good about it and I'd feel so confident. Then I'd take the platform and my numbers would just not be there.
Mm.
So I ended up kind of really evaluating like psychologically, where is this kind of throwing me off guard? And I ended up kind of figuring out that being watched by a judge and having that, all eyes on you type of experience when you're lifting, it almost throws me through a little bit of a loop. And so it was something that I'm still working on overcoming, but I feel like I'm like getting more confident taking the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a normal experience, right? I think it's totally normal for people to step on the platform and have that excitation level that's a little bit higher than your normal baseline. Like when you're working out in your home gym and you're like
Yeah.
you're in your courage corner just kind of grinding it out, and you're like, yeah, I'm kicking ass, I'm feeling good, and then stepping
Yep.
on a platform with a whole bunch of people in the room and somebody staring at you,
Scary. I get
it
like an adrenaline rush
raises the level a little bit.
and then an adrenaline crash. So
Yeah.
something you don't want to experience when you're lifting.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually something. Did you wear a heart rate monitor while you were doing it?
Oh, actually, I kind of want to. So I've seen Dennis wearing these like really elaborate suits that are like showing. Have you seen his videos where he's
Like,
like
oh yeah,
doing long cycle and snatch and like showing all the muscle groups that are working? I looked into the suits. They're like, oh, they're pretty expensive, so I'm not going to do that. But I do think I want to get a heart rate monitor to see
yeah.
like gauge where I'm at with that.
I would definitely recommend it. It's super interesting, and so I'll put a plug in for Morpheus. Morpheus is one of our sponsors for the WKSF North American Championship, but I reached out to them to be a sponsor because I love their system so much. So kind of what makes them a little bit different than some of the others is you take an HRV test in the morning every day, and so it's going to track how your body is responding to your stress from a day-to-day level, how well you're recovering from your training, but it actually dynamically adjusts your heart rate training zones based on what your recovery level is, which is really, really cool. So on a day when you're like, if you got like 6 hours of sleep or 5 hours of sleep, your red zone threshold actually is tuned down a little bit. So it'll actually adjust your training zones based on how recovered you are. But on the days when you're really recovered, you have your kind of your higher threshold, which is really, really interesting. It's a really nice way to actually kind of tune, especially longitudinally when you're putting up so much volume and so much cycle right to it, to see like it helps you adjust that intensity based on how recovered you are, and you can see some of those long-term trends. And I found it really useful with some of my athletes to see, oh, okay, on a normal day in the gym in your garage, you step onto the platform, your average heart rate is 89, 90 beats a minute when you step on the platform after your warm up, and on competition day it was at 110 when you stepped on the
Oh my
platform, right?
God.
Like you'll see
Wild.
that.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
really
you'll
like
see that
that.
general excitation level is just higher because there's people in the room, there's that energy, there's nerves, there's all of that. And so it's like, then it's like, oh, maybe that's some of the reason why, like maybe it's not all just in my head, right? It's not just that it's not just in my head. It's also that there was like physical excitation that I didn't quite account for. And so that puts you into your higher energy zones a little bit earlier in the set. Like, it's
It's
really,
hard if you're having like a long set ahead of you too. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah, super and marathon and half marathon, not a completely different game, but a very different game. Like I
Okay.
mean, it's it's akin to running to me. It's like there's a very big difference in strategy when you're running a 400 as opposed to a 3,200 meter run, right? Like you have to come out with completely different strategies, different physical attributes, right? There's a different training style, so it's pretty interesting. What made you choose half marathon over 10-minute or the traditional 10-minute shorter duration sets? Why did you choose to go for more of the endurance?
So I actually did start out doing 10-minute sets. So I've competed one time in a 10-minute snatch and a 10-minute two-arm long cycle. So that was kind of my intro to kettlebell sport. So I had trained for a year to do two-arm long cycle. I competed, I did my two-arm long cycle, and then I did just like a 10-minute snatch set for fun, both with the 12 kilogram.
Nice.
Um, and I loved endurance sports, so I'm someone that just has gravitated towards that type of world. I love pushing myself, and I love that feeling of not like that you're, like, mentally broken, but like, you physically can feel something very hard, and you
Yeah.
have to ask yourself, "How am I going to do this?" Or, like, you're pushing yourself purposefully to enter that what people call the pain cave, and so I feel like a lot of personal growth and development happens there. You really get to know yourself, and you get to know what you value and, what you're really doing this for. So when you're doing longer sets, this also kind of translates to me running across Iceland. But when you're doing those things that are challenging you and that hurt and that really make you question how strong you are, there's this certain light to it that shows you, how capable you are of doing certain things in life. And if you can do this, you can do anything. So I just love that it really awakens that part of yourself to you. And like, I feel like every time I do an endurance event, I meet a different part of myself. And it's just this kind of transformative experience that's both physical, but like also very like mental and even spiritual too.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of the appeal of this sport, right? Is like you said, it takes you not to your necessarily a physical breaking point. I mean, you can, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it puts you it's that decision point. I think it happens in any really hard physical activity. There's that breaking point where you decide I can stop because my brain is telling me this is hard and I should stop, or I can
Yeah,
keep going and see how far can I keep going after my brain has told me I should stop doing this crazy thing that I've decided I'm going to do. Like,
absolutely.
why did you do this?
That's
That's
a special place to be, I think. So a lot of times I feel like people try to avoid discomfort, right? So there was this saying that we said in Iceland, descend into discomfort. And I loved it. I love that phrase. And just like really embrace the fact that you're not going to be comfortable. You're going to be doing something very challenging and it's not necessarily going to be fun in the moment. But that's a place where you are so welcome to learn about yourself, to learn about your experiences, to learn what this experience is teaching you. So I try to kind of have that bigger picture view whenever I, go into a set or, a longer endurance event, and really just have goals set for myself to show up for myself and to not prove something to others, but to prove something to, present day me, to prove something to, younger Maude that like she's so strong and like I'm a woman that I would have been proud of.
nice. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That is the essence of this sport, right? And I really think that's the essence of sport in general, right? Is to learn to really use it as a tool to learn about yourself and to continue growing as you continue to challenge yourself. So, what made you decide that kettlebell sport wasn't quite crazy enough, and you're going to join a group of people who have decided they're going to run across Iceland? How did you even get like invited to like how did you hear about it? Like when
Yeah.
you got to tell me how this came to be.
So it happened on Instagram is how I found out about the Iceland actually. So it was put together by Danny Bent and Nick Carter. And so Danny Bent, he reached out to me and he was like, "Oh, you got to come to Iceland." And I looked into it. I looked at like the little like information that they gave and I was like, this sounds absolutely crazy. Running 8 back-to-back marathons like nonstop through Iceland of all places.
Yeah,
Um,
so give us the outlines of what does this entail? Like Like this,
Yeah,
you signed up for this Viking. They said we're going to run across Iceland, and you just said
yep.
I'm in, or like, like
At
how
first,
many people
I
is
was
it? How many days is it? Like, give us a little bit of the breakdown of how this actually works.
yeah, so I was invited. I looked at it and I was like, I'm gonna think about this. Like, I didn't immediately say yes. I thought about it for 2 days, so not very long. And I was like, yep, I'm in. Like, this sounds absolutely insane. This sounds so difficult. This sounds like the craziest thing I'll ever do. Count me in. So I signed up, and what it basically entailed was 10 days, one rest day, one travel day included. And so the travel day, we just took a bus all the way north to Iceland to Akureyri, which is like all the way at the tip of Iceland. And we ran down to like the very southern part of Iceland, right on the coast, down the desert interior. And we did that for 9 days. So we ran 8 back-to-back marathons, and we had a rest day like after a week we were running. So like not a very we all needed it by then. So
Yeah.
we basically just would wake up. They would brief us in the morning. They'd tell us, these are the miles, run straight or like turn right at this like glacier or this lake, like just like, little directions so that we wouldn't get lost. But it was just us out there. And there was a lot of moments where even though we're running as a group, like you're by yourself because you're not running the same pace as people. So we're all spread out, but
So it
like,
wasn't like a relay. It wasn't like
no, it wasn't.
it wasn't like you do 20 miles and then somebody else does another 20. It was like you're all just running this
We're all
together
just running this
as a
together.
crew.
As a crew, we're just kind of tackling the distances. There were 3 days that were ultra marathons where we ran 30 to 33 miles, which was intense. So when we were descending into discomfort, we had that Monday was
I'm
like
not
30
sure it was discomfort. I'm thinking this is descension into madness a little bit.
Yeah, we had Monday of that week was an ultra marathon. So I think it was like 32 miles. And then we had a marathon on Tuesday. And then we had another ultra marathon on Wednesday. And then Thursday was our rest day. And like I think I just ate cookies in bed all day. We were lucky to be at Huts. So I was like, I'm doing a whole lot of nothing. Sat in a hot spring, ate
Oh,
hot dogs, like
great.
random hot dogs. So during this all, we're living outside for the most part. There were a few nights where we got to stay in like huts, which was very, very nice. Just to be outside was a challenge in itself. No one was expecting the weather to be as cold as it was. So we ran through freezing ice storms. We ran through like snow that was like inches deep. We ran
I
through
mean, I feel like they were pretty upfront in the naming, like, you know.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of knew what we were getting into, but it was definitely wild just being out in the conditions. I think that also posed a really big challenge in addition to the long miles back to back to back, but being outside, living in the elements, you know, huge, huge challenge mentally and physically. And then, for nutrition, we are eating these like dehydrated meals. So, I never want to see one of those again. They were edible. I'll say that. Weren't
Yeah,
my
this is very much leaning in on the food is fuel
Yeah,
attitude when
that
you're
was
doing something like
100%
that.
it. It's one of those situations where you're like, I need these calories or I am not going to be able to keep going. So, you ate it, but I don't know how many people actually enjoyed eating it.
What were your macro requirements? Like did they calculate? I'm assuming because you had to, pre-package all your stuff, like they kind of calculated out like what the caloric demand was kind of going to be for each person and kind of
I
estimated
think
that, do you know?
I actually didn't really keep track of all that. For me, I just tried to eat as much as I could. So, I think we'd probably burn around 3,000 to 5,000 calories a day, depending on, body size and a lot of other factors. So for me, my whole goal was to stay on top of intake. So eating a
So
lot of
you
sun.
did you didn't think about that stuff. You didn't have to pre-pour because the reason I like this is a total tangent, but like my wife and I just got back from the Boundary Waters and we had to pack dehydrated food for a 5-day trip with us and our kids and like like I was actually like trying to make sure that I had enough calories for my
I was worried about
because
that.
I was telling my wife like you realize like I eat like 3,500 4,000 calories a day a
Yeah,
lot of times, right? Like we're gonna have to figure out like what is the like stuff that can pack enough caloric punch and especially when you're going to
keep
be
you going.
I was worried about
Be
canoeing, like I was canoeing, not running across
done.
not running across Iceland running friggin' marathons, but
Yeah. It was insane, but I'm pretty small, so I'm 5 feet tall. I'm like 110 pounds. So my caloric intake's probably a lot different than what yours would be.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I did.
Like two of you, if not three.
I did bring 92 waffles with me just in case. I ate 64, so I did the math. So I didn't eat all 92. But I was like known as the snack girl. So I had like a whole duffel bag of snacks that I was sharing that had like sour gummy worms or Sour Patch Kids, waffles, Oreos, cookies, like everything. I brought a surplus of things, and that definitely helped out because
All
I
the carbs, all the carbs, carbs
always
for performance, people, carbs for performance. You
need
got to
them.
have
You
them.
need the carbs.
You got to have them. So you also mentioned the desert interior. Like I know a little bit about Iceland's unique landscape. It is a really unique country. So and you've seen more of it than most humans ever will. So tell us a little bit more about the different terrain that you experienced, the different climates you experienced, and kind of like how like was there anything that surprised you about Iceland other than how cold how cold and snowy
Okay.
and wet
Well,
it was? But
first thing first, the sheep on the side of the hill. So like there was just sheep everywhere, like in the farmland. So we started out in Akureyri, kind of near like all the different farmland, and you'd like look to your right, and there'd just be like sheep just grazing on like a hill next to you. And from my Northeast Boston perspective, I only see sheep on farms.
yeah.
So for me, that was just wild, and I loved seeing the sheep. They became almost like a source of comfort for me. Like in the pain cave, I'd look to my right and I'd be like, oh my God, a sheep. No sheep in the desert. So like just pain cave, nothing there. So lots of farmland to start out with. And then on day two, we had our first ultra marathon. So it was pretty much just 32 miles and we climbed all the way up. So a lot of it was uphill that day. And we went through the valleys. We saw waterfalls. We continued climbing until we reached like the entry point of the desert. And up there is when it really started to snow. So it was like sideways snowing at us by the end of that day. Very, very windy, very cold, a lot of nothing, a lot of gray. It looked like the moon. And so I would say we were in the moon or on the moon for like 3 to 4 days. So a lot of nothing. Like there was just a road of nothingness. So like if you had to go to the bathroom, you're like taking a shit in like the middle of like an open desert. So not a lot of privacy. Just a
I
very
reckon you probably weren't too worried about anybody stumbling upon you though either. 'Cause you're
no,
in
because
the
there's
middle of
no one
nowhere.
around. Like you might like have a teammate that's like running by or something, but everyone's pooping outside at that point, and like privacy was not a thing. So yeah, that was interesting just because it was so open. There was just a whole lot of dark black sand and like an occasional rock that wasn't very big. So that landscape, honestly, very a good word to describe it. Bleak.
I
I
was gonna
think
say Stark seems to be the word
yeah,
that comes to mind.
Stark is a good one too, I would say. And then we also had like glaciers. So I've never seen a glacier before. And I distinctly remember I was running one day and I'm like looking over to my right. And this was like one of our first clear days because we ran in a lot of like pouring rain and snow and just like horrible, horrible weather conditions. And so the sky was clear. And I was like, what is that? And I thought it was a cloud because I've never seen a glacier. I've never seen anything like that before. And I asked them and I was like, what is that? Like, just like what it looked so odd to me and it creeped me out. Like I don't know what it was. I was creeped out by it, but I learned it was a glacier. And so we'd be running and like we ran like I don't even know, maybe 30 miles, and the glacier was still there, like it's still right where it was. So it wasn't like I thought like, oh, I'm running all these miles but the glacier's not moving, so that creeped me out too, just like not
They
making
do move
progress.
very, very slowly.
Yeah. And then we also had mountains, snow-capped mountains, some really, really beautiful mountains, a lot of rivers that we had to cross. So these were glacier rivers. They were ice cold. We'd be
Mm.
running and we'd have to just like get across them. Luckily, none of
So then you're running with wet feet, like wet, cold
it was
feet.
wet feet. If you take your shoes off, you're getting sand in your socks, everything. It's kind of designed to test you and really push you to your limits. Um, I hated the cold rivers. I'm not a cold plunge girly. They were my least favorite. Every time I'd be like, I got this. I would like bravely charge into those waters because the longer you wait, it's not going to get any warmer. So I would just try to like get through it. But every time I was such a baby. That was my least favorite. I think the first time, so we had this big river crossing. I think it was day 3 or 4, and they briefed us for it, and they were like, "Oh, we have a big river crossing." So me, being an idiot, I was like, "All right, I'm gonna do this river crossing in my underwear. Like, I'm not gonna wear my pants. I'm not gonna wear my socks. Like, I'm gonna wear my underwear and I'm gonna put my pants on afterwards." We get to the river. The river was knee deep, and I'm like walking across in my underwear, and I was like, "This was so unnecessary." And everyone's like, "Maude, how deep did you think this was gonna be?"
You
So
were like thinking Oregon Trail, like
thinking like
Maude
it's
didn't
gonna
make
be
it
like
fording across
life.
the river.
Yeah, so I'm wading across a knee deep with river in my underwear. So from that moment on, I learned like you don't have to take your pants off for the river crossing.
Well,
So
and on the plus side, you gained 10,000 followers on Instagram that day.
yeah, yeah, I was very that was a funny moment. So at least like I can look back and laugh at myself for that.
And I love that none of your teammates were like, you realize this isn't that deep. Like
So
nobody told you
like it
that
was
ahead
like
of
I was
time.
in the river and they were just like, "What are you doing?" Like, yeah, just, being me, doing mod stuff. So, that river was the most memorable one that I crossed, of course. How could it not be?
Yeah. Kettlebell Drenga. Rating season is upon us. The battle for the title of North American Champion returns to the Twin Cities for the 2024 WKSF North American Championship. Pro Kettlebell has returned as a sponsor and added to the horde with $500 worth of gift cards ready to be claimed. Register today for your chance to fight for glory and claim your spoils. Registration is available now for $100 at TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com. All competitors are registered for raffle prizes, and there is a $500 cash purse up for grabs for top competitors, sponsored by Living.Fit. We'll be back at the Athlete Lab in Little Canada, Minnesota on Saturday, September 28th, and accepting video submissions for online competitors. Go to TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com to register today. Come, answer the call of battle. Join us. Fight for your clan. Fight for yourself. Claim your spoils and your glory. Sign up now, and may your name forever ring out in the Hall of Champions. Sign up today. TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, yeah, but besides that, we got into, more mountains, more deserty type of landscapes, really saw so much, like, drastic differences that, like, it's almost unbelievable that it's just one country, to be honest, like, all of the different disparities.
Yeah, they've got a lot of biomes contained in a very small island, which is pretty cool. That's how wide were these rivers? Were most of them like fairly quick, or were some of them long? Like I'm assuming some of them were quick and some of them were longer, but I don't know.
I think, maybe it takes, like, a couple minutes to get through, so, like, nothing too big. Like,
Okay.
we were pretty lucky that it was so cold. So this summer in particular has been the coldest summer on, like, Iceland history in, like, years. So a lot of the rivers would have been a lot bigger, but the
Mm.
glaciers haven't melted because 'cause it's been so cold. So that played it was kind of a double-edged sword, like, on one hand, we're freezing, but on the other hand, at least the rivers aren't, like, over flooding. So, I mean, pick a side.
And I get, does that mean was there current to contend with still?
Yes, there was. Some people got knocked over a couple times, but for the most part, it was very manageable, luckily.
Okay. And you only thought about this for 2 days before you said yes. Was there a tipping point or a particular, like, what was it that made you say, "Yeah, I'm," like, was there a personal value or something that you're just like, "I say yes to crazy things," or I am gonna do a hard thing," like, or was this like a bucket list thing? Like, what is it that, like, inspired you to say, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this"?
So, I personally there's no bucket list that, like, I particularly follow. I definitely have, like, a list in mind of things I wanna do in life. But I'm someone that really enjoys saying yes to experiences, and in this particular year, I really made a promise to myself last September that I was going to set out to do some challenging things this year. I really wanted to make a promise to myself to set goals and to achieve them and to make them like related to physical, challenges of some sort. So, I did a half Ironman in July. I hate biking, I hate swimming, and I pushed myself to, go ahead and get that done and achieve that goal. So I saw this and I saw this as an opportunity to experience something that I read and I kind of digested as being this once in a lifetime experience. Like how many times are you going to be able to say you ran across Iceland? And also,
Zero
I
for me.
just,
Zero, I can tell.
you're like, I'm good. I'm not doing it. Um, but also, so I lost my dad in 2020. He unexpectedly passed away. And I think that really changed my perspective on life and saving things for later.
Mm,
So I think it's really easy to look at something and say, you know what, that would be really cool, but like I'm not there yet. Like I'll do that next year or I'll do that the year after. And in reality, we're putting these things off, but we don't actually know if later's ever going to come. And that was a lesson that I learned the hard way. So when I see something that I feel in my soul is like calling me to do it, I will do everything in my power to show up and to show up for myself and to do it for myself, but also to like really emphasize that, living in the now and doing things when you're able. And like I read it and I don't even consider myself a runner, but I am in great shape. I feel like kettlebells really helps your entire body be ready. And I like to stay ready for opportunities. So that was something that I was like, you know what? This is going to be a very once in a lifetime experience. It's going to be really hard, but it's going to be really unique. And I thought it was going to be really special to be able to meet people and to share this experience with people from, across the world. So that was really the deciding factor for me was, wanting to do it. And then also like being terrified, like, am I ready? But then also knowing like deep down, like I am capable and all I have to do is say yes and show up.
love that. Well, I'm sorry for your loss of your father. That's obviously hard for anybody. I haven't gone through that myself yet, but like I commend you for taking such a healthy perspective on it, after having time to grieve and process, obviously, but it's changed your perspective that like tomorrow's not guaranteed. So I'm going to say yes to things like that. That's a super positive perspective on things, and I'm sure your father's probably very proud of you for that. That's a lesson that you took from that. So that's really inspiring and very very cool to hear that's how you kind of moved forward from a really challenging personal loss.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to, find those harder lessons in life that you maybe don't want to learn, but, sometimes you're faced with it and you got to rise to it and finding ways to, cope and really learn this new part of life has been also, an inspirational factor in like doing things that push you outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. So take us through kind of what a typical day looked like, because you guys are running this as a group, but as you mentioned, right, like people are going to fall into different paces. So what did a typical day kind of look like? Like how early were you guys getting started? Were you eating together? Were people leaving at different times, or was everybody kind of like it was like a planned thing? Like take us through kind of what a typical day looked like.
Yeah, so we'd wake up, it depended on, how many miles we had, but we typically woke up around like, 6 a.m., 6:30. We'd all eat breakfast together. So, we'd be in our tents. People had their tent groups. There would be a collective place where, we'd go get hot water. We'd all be eating our porridge. And I loved the porridge. Side note, like I thought that was great. That was my breakfast and lunch every day. And like I'm craving it now that I'm back, which is like a problem. Um,
Interesting.
but we'd wake up, we'd have breakfast, we'd have time to digest, we'd have coffee, and then we would have, time to break down tents. So we'd have to pack everything up. We would have a day bag where we would pack, our lunch, any snacks that we need. If you're like putting anything in your like hydration bladders, we'd pack that. You'd pack extra layers. And so those would be at different aid stops along the way. So we'd pack our day bag, we'd pack our night bag, which we wouldn't see again until we were done with the day. So you didn't want to get anything from your night bag that you would need when you're running. That was just for after the run. We'd break down the tents and then pack everything up. And we had two Land Rovers that were like kind of following on course or going ahead and creating, these little stopping points for us to, refuel, to fill up water, to just like take a moment to sit down, change shoes, change socks, like whatever you might need. And so we'd have our briefing and we'd all leave at the same time. And so we'd start each day, running together. And, as anything, there are some people that, were faster runners that were just really, leading the group every single day. There were people that, were, middle of the pack, and then there were like slower people. And honestly, like your place in it really changed depending on the day. Um, I don't think anyone was there to run it as fast as possible, from my knowledge at least. Like, I don't think anyone really had the goal of like, I want to run this as fast as I possibly can. I think we were all just wanting to run each day for ourselves, or for, whatever reasons people were there for. We had people raising money for, veterans, for, first responders, making sure that they were showing up for, their causes, whether it be personal or charity, and pushing themselves. So we'd all meet up at the aid stations typically, and like we'd share snacks, we'd kind of rest sometimes for up to like an hour, depending on the day. But like if it was really windy or really snowy or really cold, like we wouldn't really stop. We'd just keep going until the end, just because you would freeze. Like you're running, you're
Better to keep moving than to stop when the conditions
yeah. So
are harsh.
we definitely like fine tuned that towards the end. There were a few days where we were just like sitting and like freezing. And I think there's like a picture of me just like inside my poncho. And like people didn't think I was a person on the chair. They just thought I was like a coat. Um, so I was someone that was definitely on the colder side when we'd stop. So I'd try to just like keep moving if I could. And so we'd have those aid stops where like we'd refuel. And then at the end of the day, if you're like really fast, which I was not, I was never at the front of the pack at all. You'd help set up tents for everyone. So like if
So
you
your
were
reward for finishing first was more work.
yeah, so if you were really fast and really strong, you got to set up tents first. So there was that at the end of it, where like that's if we're wild camping. If we're at a hut, you're not really like setting up any tents. But yeah, you would set up tents, and then people would kind of finish and come in as they'd wrap up their miles, and then we'd eat dinner, either together, or like, people would kind of just eat dinner when they got back. So I think that a lot of that depended on where people were. And then we'd have an end of the day briefing. And so at that briefing, they would give out like certain like awards basically for like the day. Like if you were taking great shots, then you got a shot of like Icelandic moonshine, which I was selected for at one point. Um, I will never drink moonshine again.
What is Icelandic moonshine? Because I know what moonshine is in
Yeah,
America, but I'm
it,
curious what is Icelandic moonshine made from?
it tastes just like rubbing alcohol. I don't know what
That's what most moonshine tastes like.
yeah. It wasn't very pleasant, but how can you say no to Icelandic moonshine when you're running across Iceland? Like, you can't. You kinda have to rally, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
and so then there's also, like, this special cup that was, like, I think it was crafted out of bone. It was very cool looking, and they would give it to people that, like, did, like, outstanding things for, like, a teammate, or, something like that along the way. So they'd give little shout outs, they'd kind of debrief the day, and then they'd kind of tell us like, "Oh, tomorrow you're gonna be running, an ultra again," or, "Tomorrow is, 26 miles," or whatever it was gonna be. So they'd give us a little bit of insight for the next day at the end, and then, we'd all go into our tents, we'd fall asleep, um, and yeah, we'd start all over again the next day. So I think for me, at the end of the day, it was very much like being present in the moment, because when you're, finishing an ultra marathon and you have to wake up and run a marathon the next day, it can be disheartening because you're sore, you're tired. And if you're really thinking like, oh God, I have to do this again tomorrow, it kind of screws with your mentality a bit. So
Mm.
I would just focus on, enjoying my little orange bag of dehydrated food, putting my warm clothes on, getting in my sleeping bag, and like spending time with my teammates laughing and just like enjoying where we were. Because I think a lot of it was like making sure that you didn't think too far ahead, because there was so much more that you had to do. So just enjoying the fact that, you made it through the day, you got your miles done, and now you're sitting in a warm sleeping bag with people that, really became like family. So
Yeah. I imagine, I mean, especially since this tends to happen when you're outdoors, right? Like you tend to just go to sleep when the sun goes down, and you tend to get up when the sun comes up. So like, how many hours of sleep were you getting after putting in these huge challenging days, burning a ton of calories and working hard and fighting harsh conditions and all of those things? I'm I'm assuming there was probably not a ton of excess energy at the end of the day. So how long were you guys sleeping for, and how was your recovery? Like, were there any, you mentioned hot springs, were there any other like recovery things that you were doing as well as you were gone?
Okay, so for one, I was drinking amino acids like throughout the day, and like protein. So I brought little frog fuel protein pouches that I thought would help with recovery. I don't know if they did. They may have. It may have made like a very small difference. But as far as sleeping goes, so Iceland in the summertime has something called the midnight sun. So
Mhm.
the sun doesn't really go down until like almost 10 p.m., maybe a
Oh
little bit.
yeah, I suppose.
So, like, I had a few nights in the tent where, like, we're getting ready for bed, and I'm like, "Can someone turn the light off?" And it's like, "We're outside, girl. Like, there's no light in here."
You didn't have your sleep mask with your
Oh my god.
get some cucumber slices and
Right?
no.
I'm like, "Where am I? Did I I can't turn the light off." No, it's the sun. So that was a little wild. So I slept with a hat on and I would just like pull it over my eyes. People did have sleep masks and earplugs. I think for the most part, we all collectively passed out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So for me, like I would say like 160-ish miles in, I had something very rare happen that's never happened to me before. And I got exercise induced urticaria on my feet. So
Oh wow.
that is basically an allergic reaction to exercise. So I was
Mhm.
allergic to running is what, the team doctor had diagnosed me with. I got back from an ultra and I was like, what's up with my feet? Like they had hives all over them. They were hot. They were so swollen. It was like the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. Um, so that night I took like 5 Benadryl and I had the best night's sleep of the entire event. And then for the rest of it, I would just like pop a couple Benadryl before running, and like I was like fighting through a lot of demons out there after that. But yeah, I think it, sleep was not really something that we got a lot of, but it wasn't horrible. Like it was kind of a mixed bag. Like some nights were better than others.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about the midnight sun. You were in the midnight sun season. So
Yeah,
yeah, I can
yeah,
imagine
it wasn't.
that's
It,
an extra challenge for you.
yeah, no, it creeped me out. I didn't like it. That and glaciers. Like,
Glaciers and 24-hour sunshine, not for Maude.
no.
And apparently running.
Apparently
I
I'm a
mean,
little running like 160 miles in and my body's like, get out.
I
This
was
is
just gonna say, I think it's a little unfair to say running, but like, running across entire countries maybe, crosses the threshold
that might
of systemic inflammation that starts to cause cascading symptomology like that. That's I can imagine that would be really challenging. You said some demons came out when you were fighting through that your feet being swollen and covered in hives, and
that was
I can only imagine that that's a pretty tough physical challenge. But so how did you stay like mentally focused, or how did you handle those challenges? I guess is probably the best way to say it. Like, how did you handle those challenges when you're in the pain cave by yourself? Your teammates have fallen away and there's nothing but you and the road.
yeah, so I cried. That was the first thing I did. I remember that day like vividly. It was an ultra marathon and my feet just hurt so bad. So this
Mhm.
was the week of descending into discomfort. And I remember just like wanting to cry and I was like, why not? Like, why
Yeah.
not cry? Like, do it. So I cried off and on throughout the day. But then, I would just try to like focus on what the pain was trying to teach me. And so in that moment, and
I was
honestly,
trying to teach you to fucking stop running.
it was trying to teach me to quiet
That's
down and stop running. Um, yeah, definitely that. But honestly, like not even like just that day, but like I woke up every single day in Iceland and I said to myself, how the hell am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to actually like run a marathon today? How am I going to run an ultra today? Because like we've all been sore. Like I was that level of sore where you're like waddling down the stairs and you can barely walk. And like I was like that pretty much, early on since maybe after day 2 after after a marathon and ultra. So, I would wake up and I would legitimately like question like how am I going to do this? And somehow at the end of every day I would get it done. And so I just kept reminding myself like it's hard right now. Everything hurts right now. Every single step hurts right now, but you're going to get it done. And so that would just happen, and then, you'd pass the hours and I would just think of like different people or think about different stages in life where, I face things that are so much harder, like in the grand scheme of things than, running a marathon with swollen feet. So I would just remind myself, like, you're here and that's freaking amazing that you're here. Like you're in the middle of this and like it hurts right now, but it's not gonna like eventually you're going to finish this. Eventually you're gonna be home. You're not gonna be in Iceland anymore. So embrace this and don't wish it away. Like sit in it, just like really learn from it and think about all the things that have taught you who you are. And that got me through it. Just thinking about people, places, experiences, all of those formative moments where, in life you've wanted to quit, or even when you have quit, and how that has taught you to keep seeing things through. So, for me, one day I thought about my 16-year-old self. I had dropped out of high school. I was really suffering from PTSD. I was a survivor of sexual violence from age 13. And, I think about that time in my life and I'm like, this isn't hard compared to that. This is something that I am more than capable of doing. Like, this is physically hard and this is challenging me mentally, but I'm strong enough to, finish whatever miles are ahead of me. And also just like embracing the fact that maybe I'm not going to be fast today. Maybe I have to walk a lot of today. And that's okay. I'm not going to, be running even 10-minute miles. Like, let's just try to walk like 18-minute miles or something. So making very achievable goals was something that really helped me get through that.
That's awesome. I'm I'm curious, and thank you for sharing that. I know that's not easy. That's not easy to share something that personal. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm curious now because you brought up the crying part, and I'm wondering. I know for me, like crying is very cathartic, right? It's a way that our body like externally it takes things internal and kind of like forces them to the surface, right? So now I'm curious. The crying physical, mental, a little bit of both? Like
Percent.
how did you experience that?
Okay, so there was different types of crying.
Yeah.
I'm gonna analyze my different types. So like in the middle of it, when like I want to say it was like Wednesday of our last week, and that was an ultra day. I cried because I was in pain and it hurt and it sucked. And like I was just like, I don't like why am I here? Why did I do this to myself?
The
Like this
questioning crying, like
questioning
why
crying.
have I chosen this for
Like,
myself?
why am I putting myself through this? That type of crying. But
Yeah.
then on the last day, and then also like, when I finished that day, I cried because I was so proud of myself. And like I couldn't believe that I had become someone in life that was able to do something this hard. And that just like honestly, that type of crying took me by surprise. Because I did believe in myself. I showed up in Iceland fully believing like I had everything it took to get this done. But I vividly remember a time in my life where believing in myself, like just believing in myself to do anything, even like showing up to school and like doing homework or like taking a quiz and like being smart enough to pass, like that wasn't something that I was able to do. I just did not have any type of self-belief whatsoever. So the fact that I was able to take on this giant challenge of running across an entire country, and really believing in myself to show up and to do it, and then to actually execute and to actually get it done, I was just bawling. Like it was a full body type of crying experience. And it
From your bones. You're crying
like,
from your bones at that
it was
point.
also just, like, pouring rain, and, like, it was raining sideways on us, like, I was soaking wet, we all were, and I'm crying, and I'm like, "Oh my god," like, the tears are keeping my face warm, so, like, that was a good strategy too. Um, but it was just, this really powerful moment, and I couldn't control it. It was something that really surprised me, to be honest, to cry
Mm,
like that, because it was just so meaningful, and it was like a good cry. It wasn't like I'm sad crying. It was just like a very powerful, transformative cry to like be so proud of yourself for doing something so hard, um, that like you never thought in a million years you'd be able to do.
yeah. Were there any other things that surprised you from the journey?
Yeah, honestly, so one thing that surprised me, this is gonna sound cliche, but one of my goals going into Iceland. So this was with a group of people that I had never met before. And I really wanted to show up just as myself. So I think when you're like put in situations where you're meeting new people, it can be really easy to like put a mask on and to present yourself as someone that you think other people want to receive. And so for me, my whole goal was to show up and like just 100% be myself, be authentic, um, make people comfortable, being themselves, and to just be a safe space for, my teammates, for our crew, and really inspire people to, not be afraid to be a little weird, because I am like the weirdest person there is. I'm very quirky, I have a foul mouth sometimes, I say things that are
You're
totally out
in
of
you're in a safe space here then. I
so
sound like a sailor. I'm sorry. No, I'm
I
not
I
really sorry about it.
absolutely
I am that way.
okay, good, because me too. But I think,
Yeah, I was weirded out when you said friggin'. I was like, what fucking
like,
podcast are we
no,
doing?
no, please say the F word. Like, do not casually swear. If you're gonna swear, do it with power.
Yeah.
But I think it was really well received, and that meant a lot to me. So being able to show up and being a little bit nervous, like, is me being myself gonna be enough? Is me just being Maude, like, are people gonna like me? And, to my surprise, I really feel like I made a lot of friends and we made a lot of connections, and that was really special. So that was one thing that took me by surprise, and like a non type of related to running. But
I love that though, because I think that's like a life lesson, right? It's something it took me a long time to realize, like there's a terrible thing of anxiety. Like you show up trying to be who people want you to be, and then if they like you, like, do they really like me? Because then you just feel like you're fake. And then but then the thought of showing up and being truly who you are is terrifying, because what if you show up as who you are and they don't like you? Because that's a whole other different level of rejection. But then when you go with that second path and you show up as who you truly are and people like you, you're like, oh shit.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's such a liberating experience. Like, oh, they no, they like me for who I really am, and I don't have to pretend with these people. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
I may
I,
have found I may have found like people who just like me for who I am,
it's so special.
despite all my weirdness, right? Like what we all label
Exactly.
ourselves as our weird things. Like that's such a huge powerful thing to experience in life, and to show up as who you authentically are and to be accepted by other people is one of the best parts of the human experience, I think. So like that's awesome that was part of this journey for you, is like choosing to show up as who you are and seeing like, oh, there's a whole bunch of other people that just like me for who I am.
Yeah, it was so special, and like everyone was just so nice. And another thing that, going into this, I was a little nervous about, which is like really silly. So I'm not like a super fast runner by any means at all. And so going into it, I was really worried that like, people would give a shit if I wasn't like super fat. No one cares. No one cares at all.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's like the kettlebell sport. Like that to me is analogous to like I get self conscious about the fact that I'm like, I'm not a great lifter. I'm mediocre at this. Like I'm very strong, but like the endurance part of it, like that's never been my thing. So like I've never been great. And like people are like, nobody gives a shit whether you're CMS or rank one or like we care because we care about the sport, but like nobody thinks less of me because I've never achieved master of sport, right? Like that's
exactly. Yeah, and I have that same mentality, with kettlebell sport, and even like going back to like Denmark, like thinking like, oh, people are gonna give a shit if I don't become a world champion. No one cares.
yeah.
I mean, it's great. People will celebrate you, but like at the end of the day, we're just all happy to be a community. And I think that's one thing that Iceland was really big on, was like the community part. Like there's absolutely no freaking way that I could have run across Iceland by myself. Like the team part and the community part is exactly the reason that any of us were able to do it. And I think that remains true with like kettlebell sport. There's such a big community there, and you are always inspired by the lifter on the platform next to you. I've never taken the platform being like, I hope she drops the bell. you
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
uh
you want the person next to you to show up as their best self too, and hopefully you show up as your best self, and if that means that you win the day, great. But like that's been a huge for me. That was always a huge shift in my, like, going from a competitive sports background to like where my job was to literally impose my will on the person across from me playing football, like, to now it's like, no, I hope he shows up and does his best lift and he gets a PR and I get a PR, and if my PR is better than his PR, then I win, and if I don't, cool, I still got a PR. Right? Like it's a different way to approach competition.
yeah,
So I'm curious. You've obviously, this was pretty transformative for you. Like it's apparent from how spiritual and emotional and obviously physical, but through the journey through all of that physical challenge. How has this influenced or changed your perception of what's possible, and like how are you going to approach challenges in the future?
Yeah. So, like I said, I started every single day, questioning my ability to get this done. And so, one thing that I think one of my biggest takeaways from, running across Iceland and being able to, finish every distance and every mile was that when you're in a moment where you're questioning and you're doubting yourself, do not let that be your reality for too long. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge that, you're having doubts or that you're having fears about, whatever situation is making you feel that way. But then adapt and overcome it. Get started, take action, and just take the first step. And you'll get to where you want to go. It might take you longer. Some days, it took me, 10 hours. Some days it took me a lot less. So embracing the fact that it might look different depending on the circumstances you're facing, but don't sit in that vulnerability of doubting yourself for too long, because whether or not like you're facing some crazy challenge like running across an entire country, or even if you're just facing a challenge in life with work or school or friends or relationships, whatever it might be, um, don't convince yourself that anything is impossible, because I really feel like the mind can convince the body where to go. And I feel like if you get stuck in a thought process for too long, you're going to be having like a self-fulfilling prophecy of whatever it is that you're dreading. And there might even be some validity to like what you're thinking. Like, this is going to be really hard. How am I going to do this? Like, that might be 100% true. But don't sell yourself short. So for me, I'm going to take that knowledge of like, really recognizing that each day I started out doubting myself, and I took that, and instead of being stuck on it, I got ready, I put my shoes on, and I took the first step. And by the end of the day, I was sitting at a different campsite having ran another marathon or having ran another ultra marathon, and I was that much closer to finishing my goal. And rinse and repeat. I just did that over and over and over again, and I really feel like I taught myself like the value of not trusting your thoughts when they're telling you negative things, when they're telling you that you can't do something or that you're incapable. So that's something that I think has been like the biggest takeaway. And like that was the most transformative thing, because I genuinely was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And I did it. So that was wild.
So if I can reflect it back, it sounds like you're saying recognize your doubts and understand that they might be valid doubts, but do it anyways and understand that you're stronger than you think you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think definitely I think everyone is a lot stronger than they think they are. I think that's something that we all, maybe just me, and maybe I'm like grouping everyone together, but I feel like everyone could believe in themselves a little bit more.
I think you're right about that. I think that's very true. And I think that's why doing hard things on a consistent basis is so valuable, because it gives us data points to be like, I can do hard shit, right? And just
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
give yourself those data points, so then you just get more and more confidence that like I can overcome things that I didn't think I could do.
Oh yeah, I definitely think there's a big confidence building and like deliberately putting yourself in discomfort, like and embracing that. Smelling the flowers in the garden of pain.
Descend into discomfort. I like that, A, because I love alliteration, but I also love the idea of descending into it, because you're acknowledging that it's going to be hard. And like we think of like, the descent into madness as a bad thing, right? Like the descent into discomfort is generally a bad thing. But we're choosing it, right? That's the whole, like the embrace the suck is another mantra that I love from, the special forces. They say embrace the suck. Like you acknowledge that it's going to suck and you embrace it, you welcome it, right? Like I love that, the descend into discomfort, because you're choosing to go down those stairs or that escalator or whatever you want to call it. Or like maybe it's a slide, I don't
Goes
know,
right down to hell. There we
yeah,
go.
you're choosing it. It's not something that's happening to you. You're choosing it.
Yeah.
You're making that choice, which I really love. So we're almost out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I'll ask what's next for you? Like, are there any other big crazy adventures that you're doing, or you're like getting back to what are your next things that you're focused on?
Okay, so this is more like of a personal, this is like a fun trip, so it's not like running across the country, but I am doing 103 miles this week. I'm leaving to go to Switzerland to do the Tour du Mont Blanc. So I'm doing a 9-day through hike, so not a marathon a day, a little less than that. Um, but I'll be hiking through Switzerland, France, and Italy, and I'll be doing that. And then I'll get back from that, and I have the All-American Kettlebell Open coming up. So those are the top two, what's next.
October 13th out in 12th and 13th out in Atlantic City. Shout out to our
Yeah,
buddy Nikolai Puchlov and Ray's Kettlebells and Dennis and the crew putting on. It's an AKLU qualifier out there on the
yep,
East Coast. So that's awesome.
very
What are you lifting
excited.
out there?
I'm hoping for the 20 kilogram, but
Yeah.
given like all of the events I've been doing that have been very long endurance training, my training has definitely taken a bit of a backseat, respectively so. I definitely, weigh the pros and
Well,
cons.
I won't think any less of you if you decide to lift the 16.
I might lift the
As
16.
we were just talking about, you choose to go to the 16. I don't think anybody will think any
I don't
less of
think anyone
you.
will give a shit at all. So the goal is to lift 20, and I'm gonna reevaluate when I'm back from the Tour du Mont Blanc and see, where I'm at physically. And if I'm feeling like the 20 is it, I'm gonna go for the 20. And otherwise, I'll be back on my trusty 16 that I've grown to love, my lemon. So
All right. And then this question is usually, if you've listened to the podcast, is the one that I love to ask people, and it's usually dedicated towards kettlebell sport. But this I'll genericize a little bit and say, if you could give somebody just one tip that they're looking to get started, somebody that hasn't ever done anything challenging, like they haven't physically challenged themselves in that way, and they've decided, like, yeah, I'm inspired, Maude has inspired me, I'm gonna go do some hard shit. Like, what would be your one tip that you would tell them to get started when they get started on that journey?
okay, so this is gonna sound weird. This is a weird tip, and I'm gonna preface it by
Love
how
it. Bring on the weird. Let's go to the weird
I would
place.
say look in the mirror and look at yourself and tell yourself your goal. And do that, every single day for as long as it takes until you really start believing in your ability to achieve it. Um, and also, not only telling yourself your goal, but come up with some adjectives that describe how you want to feel when you achieve it. So, you feel powerful, you feel proud, you're so strong, and really look at yourself and say those words to yourself. And it's gonna feel weird. It's so weird to talk to yourself in the mirror. But I think it's really a good hack in getting started, because I feel like taking that first step and doing something that might feel absolutely crazy is really scary. It's terrifying, to be honest. Like, I have always thought that believing in yourself is one of the scariest things you can do, but it's worth doing, and you are worth taking that jump and taking that leap and doing whatever it is that your soul is telling you to do, because I don't think dreams are put in us by accident. I think we, have been inspired for whatever reason to achieve these dreams because we're meant to do it. So believe in yourself, look in the mirror, tell yourself your dream, and then talk to yourself in a way that is celebrating how you want to feel when you achieve it.
I love that. I love that. You're putting yourself in the mental space of what it's going to feel like to achieve that thing that you're scared of. I love
Absolutely.
it.
I'll do it.
I don't think that's weird at all. I think that's fucking awesome. So thank you. Thank you very much. And all right, so they follow, how do they get at you? You're at Modern Living on Instagram, or are you
Yep.
at Modern Living everywhere? Is that your IG
Oh, it's
handle?
Instagram. I just, I love Instagram just for fun. So, if you want to be friends, if you want someone that's going to be your hype girl, I love meeting new friends. If you're like considering doing something crazy that like you want someone to absolutely encourage you to do, as long as it's not like super self-destructive, I will tell you to go for it.
Love it. I love it. Well, Maude, thank you so much for coming on. And I just want to say, I think the fact that you did this is awesome. Thank you for being so open and sharing so much about your personal journey that got you there, and all of the craziness that was the Viking run. I really appreciate your time, and this was super fun. So thank you so much again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.